Here's a number I want you to sit with for a second before we get into anything else. $72,000. That's how much more one person will spend on rent over 3 years compared to a colleague doing the same job at the same company, earning the same salary, just living across the river in New Jersey. $72,000. Not because one of them is reckless, not because one of them is careless with money, just because of one decision about where to live. Now, is that $72,000 well spent? Is it buying something real? Or is it the most expensive habit in their financial life? That's what we're here to talk about today. My guest is Daniel, a financial advisor based in New York, who has sat across from hundreds of clients wrestling with exactly this decision. And here's what makes him the right person to talk to. He hasn't just analyzed this from the outside. He's done both. He's paid Manhattan rent, he's commuted from New Jersey, he knows what both actually costs, in money and in everything else. Samuel, welcome.
Thanks for having me. And I'll just say, leading with $72,000 is exactly the right move because that's the number people almost never calculate. They look at the monthly difference and think, it's only $1,500 more. They don't annualize it, they definitely don't multiply it over 3 years.
Which is a very human way to make the math feel smaller than it is.
Very human. And it's one of the first things I try to correct when a client comes in with a housing decision. The monthly number is almost never the right unit for thinking about this.
Okay, so let's build the full picture. Walk us through the actual comparison. What are we really dealing with here?
Right, so the scenario I use with clients is fairly standard. You're 32, you work in Midtown Manhattan, you're good at your job, and your rent, a one-bedroom in Manhattan, is running you about $4,000 a month. A colleague at your firm, same salary, lives in Jersey City. Their one-bedroom is $2,500. And a third coworker commutes from a suburb in Westchester. They're paying around $1,900 a month. More space, quieter street, parking included.
So just to land the numbers, Manhattan is $48,000 a year, Jersey City is $30,000, Westchester suburb is just under $23,000.
That's the gap you're choosing when you sign a Manhattan lease. $24,000 more per year than Jersey City, about $25,000 more than the commuter suburb. And over 3 years, which is roughly how long people tend to stay in a place before making another housing decision, that's $72,000 to $75,000. That's a real down payment. That's a fully funded emergency fund and a year of maxed out retirement contributions. That's a trip around the world with money left over.
And yet, millions of people write that check every month.
Every month, which means either they're making a financial mistake on a massive scale or they're getting something that doesn't show up cleanly on a balance sheet. My job is to help people figure out which one is actually true for them.
Let's get into that, because I think there's a widespread misconception about what Manhattan rent is actually purchasing.
The most common mistake people make is thinking they're paying for the apartment. They're not. At $4,000 a month in Manhattan, you are not getting a better apartment than what $1,900 gets you in Westchester. You're almost certainly getting less square footage, no parking, no outdoor space, possibly a bathroom where the door grazes the toilet if you don't open it at the right angle.
That is painfully accurate.
What you're actually paying for is everything around the apartment, the 7-minute walk to the office instead of the 75-minute commute. The ability to say yes at 7 p.m. when someone texts, "We're grabbing dinner in Soho," because you live there and it costs you nothing but time. The serendipity of running into your industry in a coffee shop on a Tuesday morning. The fact that your next job, your next client, your next collaboration might walk up to you at a rooftop party simply because you were present and in the network.
There's an academic term for this, right? Something economists use?
Agglomeration benefits. It's the measurable value created when people, ideas, and opportunities are densely clustered. Academic research, studies out of places like Harvard and MIT, have actually quantified wage premiums for workers in dense urban environments versus comparable workers in dispersed ones. The city, over time, is not neutral for your career. It's additive.
Though that additive effect isn't the same for everyone.
Not at all. And that's the whole game. The city is a product. The rent is the price. What you need to figure out is whether you're the right consumer for that product at this point in your life, in your industry, with your goals. because the product is real. The question is whether you're actually using what you're buying.
Okay, let's talk about the second number that almost never makes it into this conversation: time.
People calculate the rent gap. They almost never calculate the time gap. Here's how I frame it: 1 hour each way commute, 5 days a week, 50 weeks a year. That's 500 hours every year. More than 20 full days of waking life spent commuting.
500 hours. When you say it like that, it lands differently.
It should. Now, I'll be fair. If you work from home 2 days a week, maybe you cut that to 300. If the commute is only 45 minutes, maybe it's 375. But even at the low end, we're talking about hundreds of hours per year. So the question shifts. It's no longer just, is $24,000 worth living in a great location? It becomes, is $24,000 worth getting 300 to 500 hours of your life back every year?
And that question has different answers for different people.
Completely different. If you're someone who genuinely uses the commute, you're reading, you're listening, you're decompressing, then the time cost is lower. Some people actually find the separation useful. The train becomes a boundary between work and home. That's real.
But
If you have kids at home and the 90-minute round trip means you miss dinner and bedtime consistently, and the only version of your child's evening you see is them already asleep, those hours cost something that doesn't have a dollar figure. That's not a spreadsheet problem anymore.
you did this personally, the Jersey City commute. How long before the reality of it set in?
About 3 weeks before I stopped pretending I was being smart. At first, I genuinely thought I had it figured out. The apartment was nicer, I was saving, and I mean actually saving about $1,200 a month compared to what I'd been paying in Manhattan. I told myself I'd read on the train, I'd use the time well. And I did for a while.
What changed?
It was the subtle stuff that got me. You stop going to things, not because you decide not to go, but because you start calculating the last train home before the evening has even started. A friend texts about a gallery opening on a Wednesday night, and instead of thinking, that sounds interesting, you're already mentally checking the path schedule. The spontaneity just quietly drains away, and I didn't notice how much I valued it until it was gone.
So you moved back to Manhattan.
Eventually. And I want to be precise about something. The savings were real. I'm not dismissing that. I saved money. I just had to be honest about what I was actually doing with it, and whether the full cost of the arrangement, time included, was actually what I thought it was going in.
Let's stay on the money side of this for a moment, because I want to pressure test the savings argument. Because on paper, moving out of Manhattan looks financially obvious. But is it actually?
It's obvious if, and only if, you actually do something with the money you save. And that conditional is where the whole argument breaks down for a lot of people.
Walk me through the real math.
Okay, so you move from Manhattan to Jersey City. You're saving $1,500 a month, $18,000 a year. Let's say you're disciplined. You take that $18,000 and you invest it consistently every year. At a conservative 7% annual return, which is roughly a long-term stock market average, over 10 years, that $18,000 a year becomes somewhere in the neighborhood of $250,000. That's not a hypothetical. That's just compound interest doing what it does.
That is a genuinely significant number.
It is, and that's the version of the suburban argument that actually holds. The person who moves to Jersey City invests the gap and builds a real asset base. They're making a defensible long-term financial decision, no question.
But
most people don't do that, and I say this with affection for my clients. What actually happens is the savings expand lifestyle. The nicer apartment gets furnished more carefully. The car payment shows up. Eating out gets a little more comfortable because, hey, you're saving on rent. The $1,500 a month in theoretical savings quietly distributes itself across a slightly more comfortable version of the same habits. And then 3 years later, you have neither the Manhattan life nor the $54,000 you were supposed to be building.
the savings disappear without any specific bad decision being made.
That's exactly right. Which is why when I'm working through this with a client, I make them answer a very specific question before we even talk about whether moving makes financial sense. Do you have a concrete plan for where this money goes? Not a vague intention, a plan. A brokerage account you'll automate a transfer into on the first of every month. A specific down payment goal with a timeline. something concrete. If the answer is yes, the Suburban financial case is genuinely strong. If the answer is, I'll figure it out, the math almost never works out the way people expect.
So the $250,000 outcome is real, but it requires a level of financial intentionality that most people underestimate.
Right, the number is available, but it doesn't happen by default. It happens by design.
I want to make this concrete because I think we've been talking in abstracts. Do you have real examples, not names obviously, but real cases of people who made this decision well in either direction?
Yeah, two clients come to mind immediately. I'll start with the Suburban one because it's the most financially clean.
Go.
Clients call him Marcus, mid-30s, works in finance, was paying $3,800 a month in a one-bedroom in Murray Hill. Smart guy, good income. We sat down and did the full picture together, not just the rent gap, but the investment trajectory. He decided to move to a town in northern New Jersey. His rent dropped to $2,100. He automated $1,400 of that difference straight into a brokerage account every month, no exceptions. He treated it like it didn't exist. The remaining $300 went toward a car payment because he now needed a car for the commute.
So he captured most of it.
Most of it. And here's where it gets interesting. 5 years later, Marcus has a down payment for a house in that same town. He bought in a market that was significantly more affordable than anything in the city. He now owns an asset. His housing cost on a mortgage is lower than his old rent. He has equity. He has a yard. And his commute, he negotiated 2 remote days a week, so it's 3 days in, is manageable.
That's the Suburban case working exactly as advertised.
When it works, it really works. But, and this is the part people miss, Marcus was unusually disciplined. He didn't let lifestyle creep happen. He automated the transfer the week he moved in before he had a chance to get comfortable with having more money. Most people don't do that. They mean to. Marcus actually did.
What about the Manhattan case? Is there a version where staying in the city is actually the better financial decision?
Absolutely. Different client, call her Priya. Mid-20s when we first talked, working in media, paying around $3,600 a month for a place in the West Village. By the traditional rent math, she should have moved. But when I actually looked at her situation, her industry, her career stage, how she was using the city, I told her she was probably underinvesting in her location, not overpaying for it.
That's a counterintuitive take.
It was. But here's the thing about Priya. She was in the exact kind of career where physical proximity to the right people was still enormously valuable. Not just nice to have, genuinely career accelerating. She was going to industry events 2-3 times a week. She was building relationships in the room. Her network, which was grounded in her being consistently present and available in Manhattan, was producing real returns in the form of better clients, referrals, editorial opportunities that people in her field who had moved to Brooklyn or New Jersey simply weren't getting offered at the same rate.
So the rent was functioning as a career investment.
A direct one. 3 years after that conversation, Priya's income had increased significantly, enough that the rent, as a percentage of her take-home, was lower than it was when we first talked. She hadn't just kept pace financially, she had accelerated. And the city was a meaningful part of why. I'm not saying that works for everyone in every industry, but in her situation, at her career stage, in media, it was the right call.
Two completely different outcomes from two completely different people making rational decisions.
That's the point. There's no universal answer. There's only your answer, based on your life, your stage, your industry, and your financial habits, which is a much harder thing to figure out than a simple rent comparison. But it's the right thing to figure out.
Let's talk about the failure modes, because I think people go into both decisions with a version of events in their head that doesn't always match reality.
The Manhattan trap is lifestyle inflation, and it's subtle because it doesn't feel like a mistake. When everything is convenient and available, your spending baseline quietly shifts upward. The $18 lunch because it's right there, the $22 cocktails because everyone's going out, the concert, the gallery, the Saturday brunch. None of it feels extravagant in the moment. And then you look at your monthly spending and realize the rent gap you thought you were navigating has effectively been absorbed by 100 small, pleasant decisions.
The rent gap disappears not because the rent changed, but because your entire spending floor moved up.
Exactly. And this is important. It's not irresponsible behavior. It's rational behavior in an environment that makes spending very easy. The city is designed to capture your dollars. You have to be deliberate about defending your savings rate in a way that people in lower cost environments don't.
And this suburban trap?
Less discussed, but just as real. Long commutes are one of the most consistently negative predictors of life satisfaction in the behavioral economics literature. Not catastrophically negative, but persistently, quietly negative. People tend to underestimate how much they'll mind the commute before they move, and then they can't quite figure out why they feel a low-level drag on their energy once they're doing it every day.
You talked about this, the idea that where you live shapes your daily energy in ways that don't show up on a balance sheet.
Energy is the one resource that doesn't roll over. If your commute is consuming 2 hours of your day and you find it depleting, you don't get a refund on those hours on Saturday. You arrive home with less. You make decisions, professionally, socially, personally, from a smaller reserve. That accumulates. And it shows up not as a dramatic problem, but as a quiet reduction in quality of life that's genuinely hard to attribute to any single cause.
There's no villain in either scenario.
No, both options have real costs. The point isn't to warn you away from either, it's to make sure you're going in with clear eyes about what you're actually signing up for.
Okay, so I want to give people something concrete they can use, because I think we've laid out all the dimensions of this: money, time, energy, career stage, but it can feel like a lot to hold at once. When a client comes to you with this decision, how do you actually structure their thinking?
I give them 3 questions, just 3. And I ask them to answer each one honestly and not aspirationally, meaning how things actually are, not how they intend them to be.
Okay, what are they?
First, what does this choice cost in money? The full number, annualized, not the monthly version. Second, what does it cost in time? Real hours, not theoretical ones. And third, this is the one people skip, what does it cost or create in opportunity? Not just career opportunity, life opportunity. The things you'll be able to do and the things you won't based on where you are and what your daily life looks like.
Say more about that third one, because I think opportunity can feel abstract.
Fair. So what I mean by opportunity is this. Your location shapes your access to things that matter. If you're in a life stage where being embedded in your industry, physically present, consistently available creates real upside, then your location has a career return on investment. That's an opportunity created. If you're in a life stage where being close to family, having more space, having more financial flexibility matters more than proximity to a professional network, then the opportunity you're protecting is different but equally real.
So it's not just what do I lose, but what does this enable?
Exactly. The 3 questions together give you a complete cost picture: the financial cost, the time cost, and the opportunity cost, in both directions, gains and losses. Most people only run one of those, usually just the financial one, and usually just the monthly version, which is the least useful version of even that.
And when you put all 3 together?
You usually get a much clearer answer than you expected. Not always the answer you wanted, but a clearer one. And clarity, in my experience, is what actually lets people make decisions they don't second guess 6 months later.
I'm going to make that into a graphic for the episode page. Money cost, time cost, opportunity cost.
Do it. It's a framework you can apply to a lot of decisions beyond housing, honestly. But housing is where it matters most because the consequences compound over years.
Let's close this out. I want to come back to the number we opened with, $72,000. After everything we've talked about, is it worth it?
For some people, yes. For others, no. And I know that sounds like a non-answer, but the precision is in the reasoning. If it were purely math, almost no one would live in Manhattan. The numbers in isolation don't justify it. The apartment isn't better. The dollar gap is real and large.
And yuck?
And yet, people keep paying it, and many of them are making a rational decision. Because what they're buying when they're actually using it is access to people, to opportunity, to time, to a version of their life that the density of the city makes possible in a way that's genuinely hard to replicate anywhere else. For someone at the right career stage in the right industry who shows up and uses what the city offers, that $72,000 is not wasted. It's invested in a different kind of asset.
And for someone who isn't in that situation?
Then it may well be the most expensive habit in their financial life. The mistake I see most often isn't moving to Manhattan or moving away from it. The mistake is not asking the question honestly. paying a premium for a life you're not actually living, or walking away from the city just because the numbers look cleaner on a spreadsheet, without accounting for what you're giving up in the trade.
Understanding what you're paying for and whether you're getting it, that's the whole game.
That's the whole game, and the answer changes over time. The calculation that's right at 27 is not necessarily the right one at 35. Revisiting it every few years, actually running the 3 questions, is worth the hour it takes.
Daniel, this has been one of the more genuinely useful conversations I've had on this show in a long time. Thank you for being both rigorous and honest about it.
It's a question worth asking carefully. Thanks for the space to actually get into it.
And to everyone listening, whatever lease you're staring down, whatever city you're in, run the 3 numbers, not the monthly one, all 3. Money, time, opportunity. The answer might be exactly what you expected, or it might surprise you. Either way, you'll be making the decision with clearer eyes. See you next week.